Hello, I'm continuing my reviews on the Godzilla series with Godzilla vs. Megalon. Now, Godzilla vs. Megalon came out in 1973, and this is the 13th film in the Godzilla franchise. The film is once again directed by Jun Fukuda, who also directed Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster, Son of Godzilla, Godzilla vs. Gigan, and right after this he would direct Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. Now, Godzilla vs. Megalon was released in America in 1976, and the American poster features Godzilla and Megalon on top of the World Trade Center. By the way, there's not a scene even remotely like that in the movie. The American poster of Godzilla vs. Megalon was clearly supposed to tie in with the poster for Dino De Laurentiis' remake of King Kong. Now, this is also the first Godzilla movie to premiere on primetime television in the US. It premiered on NBC in 1977, where it was hosted by John Belushi wearing a Godzilla suit. As a result, this is one of the most famous and recognizable Godzilla movies here in the States. Also, the English version of this movie either fell into the public domain or it was mistaken for being in the public domain, but I believe this was released on VHS more times than any other Godzilla movie because so many video companies assumed that this film was public domain. And this was actually riffed on an episode of Mystery Science Theater 3000, which by the way is one of their funniest episodes. Now, I have Godzilla vs. Megalon on VHS, and like a lot of my old Godzilla VHSs, I lost the case that this came in a long time ago. Now, Godzilla vs. Megalon is one of the most infamous installments in the franchise, with some people even considering it to be the lowest point in the series. The 1970s was when the Godzilla franchise was really at its campiest, and at this point the series was being made exclusively for children, and Godzilla at this point was an outright superhero, basically battling the monster of the week, even though these movies were coming out yearly, not weekly, but you know what I mean. Like, the Godzilla movies during this period basically followed a Saturday matinee format. And of the 70s Godzilla films, this is easily the goofiest and the cheesiest. Like, it's funny, I can imagine a person seeing the original 1954 film for the first time, and then seeing this movie for the first time. Like, if you watch this movie right after watching the original Godzilla, you probably wouldn't even be able to believe that these two films are part of the same franchise. But here's the thing, you cannot approach this movie with the same mindset that you would the original Godzilla, just like you can't approach the 60s Batman with the same mindset that you would the Dark Knight. And if you can put the original Godzilla or any of the more serious-minded Godzilla films out of your mind while watching this movie, it's honestly a really fun movie. Like, don't get me wrong, the movie's cheesy as hell, and the film's low budget definitely shows, especially with its obsessive use of stock footage from earlier Godzilla movies. And technically speaking, this is a pretty bad movie. It really is, but I still find a lot of enjoyment out of this movie. I can still watch this movie and be thoroughly entertained. Like, you could call it a so bad that it's good movie if you want, but I find this movie to be so entertaining, and I defy anybody to tell me this isn't at least an entertaining movie. Now, what's interesting about this is this wasn't originally going to be a Godzilla movie. In the film, there's a character called Jet Jaguar, and he was originally going to be the main character of the film. Now, starting in the late 60s, you had the kaiju-themed superhero show Ultraman, which was done by Eiji Tsuburaya's company. And Ultraman was hugely popular, and still is very popular. They're actually still doing Ultraman stuff today. And you could tell Ultraman definitely influenced stuff like Super Sentai, which is what the Power Rangers was based on. And around this time, Toho wanted to do an Ultraman-style superhero movie. And Jet Jaguar was actually the result of a contest that Toho was doing where kids could come up with their own ideas for superheroes. So it was actually an elementary school student who came up with the idea for Jet Jaguar. So again, this was originally going to be Jet Jaguar's movie, but then they decided to throw Godzilla into it because they figured Godzilla would have more marquee value. movie. And if you watch the movie, Godzilla does kind of feel more like a guest in this movie than anything else. Now, the plot of Godzilla vs. Megalon is it follows an inventor named Goro, his younger brother Roxanne, and his best friend Hiroshi. Now, Goro is building a robot called Jet Jaguar, but there are people who want control of this robot. It turns out that there's a secret civilization living under the ocean called Seatopia. It's kind of like a variation on the whole Atlantis myth. But it turns out that Seatopia has been deeply affected by nuclear testing, so they want revenge on the surface world. So they awaken their guardian, Megalon, who is a giant cockroach with drills for hands that shoots bombs out of his mouth, and they send him to attack the surface world. The Seatopians try to take control of Jet Jaguar, but it turns out that Jet Jaguar might have artificial intelligence. Eventually, Jet Jaguar programs himself to grow to giant-sized, and if you're wondering if the movie ever explains how he's able to do this, well, you're gonna be sorely disappointed. But now, as a giant robot, Jet Jaguar has to defend Japan from Megalon, so the Seatopians gain control of the monster Gigan. And eventually, Godzilla comes to aid Jet Jaguar in the fight against Megalon and Gigan. And that's the basic plot of Godzilla vs. Megalon. It's silly as hell, but that's the point. It's a kid's movie. Now, because there's a lot of stuff in this movie about nuclear testing, you could argue that there are some thematic similarities between this and the original film, but really that's the only connection this has to the original Godzilla, and the connection is superficial at best. Now, the Seatopians are sympathetic villains when you stop to think about it, because really they're just defending their homeland. The issue is they're sending Megalon after Japan. I'm pretty sure Japan's not the country conducting nuclear tests, so why the hell are you sending this thing after Japan? Like, that's literally the equivalent of if my neighbor was a serial killer and all of a sudden his victims' families decided to go after me. Now, probably the most famous or infamous moment in this movie is the scene where Godzilla drop kicks Megalon. It's one of the stupidest things you'll ever see in your life, but it's amazing. Now, Godzilla vs. Megalon, it's corny as hell, but it's corny in an endearing way. You really just gotta approach it with the right mindset. But I will say this, as cheesy as this movie is Akira Kurosawa levels compared to some of the Showa Gamera films. Sorry to anybody who might be a big Gamera fan. I'm a fan of the 90s Gamera series, but those Showa Gamera films, yeah, those are pretty hard to sit through. But yeah, I recommend this movie, but I totally understand why a person would not like this. Also, if you can, try to track down the MST3K episode on this movie. It's absolutely hilarious, especially how they translate the Jet Jaguar fight song by saying things like his head looks like Jack Nicholson. And there's this, like, running joke in the episode where they're calling the character of Hiroshi Rex Dart Eskimo Spy. Now, before I end this video, I want to cut to a short review on this movie done by my friend Christian Feliciano.
Godzilla vs. Megalon really confused me as a kid because there's a character in there, and I think his name is Jet Jaguar. Yes, Jet Jaguar. But when I was a kid, I knew about Ultraman, and he looks a lot like Ultraman, so I always just thought he was the great value version of Ultraman. I thought he was like the Tutti Fruities of Ultraman. Like, just a bootleg version. Because I was like, what the hell? Why is Ultraman acting so stupid? And why is he not a person underneath that costume? He was just a robot, but then he was kind of dopey and dumb. I mean, there's a point where the boy is calling out to him, trying to get him, and he's not listening. He just keeps walking. I'm like, why is he acting so freaking stupid? And it really confused me as a kid. I thought he was Ultraman, and I guess I never listened when they called him Jet Jaguar, which means I was kind of stupid as a kid, but, you know, that's a whole other story, so, anyway, so yeah. Godzilla vs. Megalon, it's really cool to see Godzilla. I remember being amazed at this one move that Godzilla does, and yes, he does this other stuff these other moves in these other films, and I haven't mentioned it yet, but he does do some martial arts stuff. But when he does this, I said, what the hell? There's a moment in this film when Godzilla jumps up onto his tail and slides across the battlefield and kicks the shit out of Megalon, or is it Gigan? I forget who it is, because Megalon and Gigan are in this. Megalon is like this big roach, and then Gigan is Gigan from, of course, the other film. So there's a point where he just slides across, and it's like some Power Ranger shit, where he just and I'm like, what the hell did I just watch? But I enjoy it, and I still enjoy it, and I laugh all the time at this film. I laugh all the time when I see that, because it's so stupid, but it's a lot of fun. I can't get enough of it. I really enjoy this film. I know a lot of people hate this one. They think it's one of the worst films ever. And when I first heard that people hated it, I thought it was because of Ultraman, how Ultraman acted. I didn't realize they just hated it because they hated it. But yeah, it's a fun film. There's a little boy in the movie, and as I mentioned before, and some other characters that, you know, they're of course friends with Jet Jaguar, and they're interesting. They're fun to watch too. And I'd like to see Godzilla and Jet Jaguar teaming up, and you know, he's showing them how to fight and all that. Like, it's just a fun film. It's just really cool. It's a kid's film, so it is really corny. You just gotta warn yourself about that it is extremely corny. But trust me, if you can go into it with that open mind of, okay, I'm gonna watch some bullshit, you know, some good bullshit, you'll enjoy this film a lot too. And yeah, thank you so much. Bye bye.